15. Gospel legends who were the most hated. What happens when the voices meant to inspire faith become the center of controversy? Behind gospel music's powerful choirs, unforgettable performances, and messages of redemption are legends who faced criticism, rejection, and sometimes fierce public backlash. Some were condemned for blending sacred music with secular sounds. Others saw their reputations shaken by personal scandals, outspoken beliefs, or simply refusing to follow the church's traditional expectations. But were they truly deserving of the anger they received, or were some judged far too harshly? Today, Golden Black Legends uncovers the complicated stories behind 15 gospel legends who were the most hated. Subscribe now and tell us in the comments which gospel legend do you believe was most unfairly criticized. Kirk Franklin. Kirk Franklin never fit comfortably inside the traditional boundaries of gospel music, and that is precisely why his career has attracted both extraordinary devotion and intense criticism. Born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1970, Franklin transformed contemporary gospel during the 1990s by combining church choirs with hip-hop, R&B, and modern production. Albums with the family and later projects produced major gospel hits, while songs such as Stomp helped introduce his sound to audiences far beyond Sunday worship. But crossing those boundaries came at a price. Some traditional listeners criticized Franklin for making gospel sound too secular, questioning everything from his energetic performances to his collaborations with mainstream artists. Yet labeling him simply hated would be misleading. Franklin became enormously successful, earning numerous Grammy Awards and remaining one of contemporary gospel's most influential figures. The backlash existed, but so did an exceptionally loyal audience. Franklin also shocked parts of the Christian community by speaking publicly about personal struggles. He has discussed overcoming an addiction to pornography, choosing confession rather than maintaining an image of spiritual perfection. In 2021, another controversy erupted when his estranged adult son, Carrion Franklin, released audio from a heated private argument in which Franklin used profanity. Kirk publicly apologized for losing his temper while explaining that their relationship had been troubled for years. Rather than ending his career, these moments complicated his public image. Franklin has repeatedly challenged expectations about how a gospel artist is supposed to behave, sound, and speak about human weakness. That makes his place in gospel legends who were the most hated more nuanced than the headline suggests. Kirk Franklin was never universally rejected. Instead, he became a polarizing revolutionary celebrated by millions for modernizing gospel, while criticized by others for pushing sacred music beyond boundaries they believed should never have been crossed. Kim Burrell. Kim Burrell built her reputation on a voice so technically distinctive that she became one of contemporary gospel's most respected singers. Born in Houston, Texas in 1972, Burrell grew up immersed in church music and eventually developed a sophisticated vocal style blending gospel with jazz influences. Albums such as Everlasting Life and The Love Album strengthened her standing, while fellow musicians frequently praised her range, improvisation, and musicianship. But in late 2016, Burrell became the center of a major controversy. Video circulated online from a sermon at the church where she preached in Houston. Her remarks about homosexuality were widely condemned as anti-LGBTQ, triggering intense backlash far beyond the gospel community. Burrell defended the broader context of her sermon, but the controversy continued. The consequences were highly visible. Burrell had recorded "I See a Victory" with Pharrell Williams for the film Hidden Figures, but a planned appearance on The Ellen DeGeneres Show in January 2017 was cancelled. Ellen DeGeneres publicly confirmed that Burrell would not appear. The episode became one of the clearest examples of a celebrated gospel performer experiencing mainstream professional fallout after controversial public statements. Still, describing Burrell as universally hated would distort reality. She retained supporters, continued performing, and remained respected for her vocal ability. The backlash was substantial, but it did not erase her career. That distinction matters for this story. Kim Burrell's fall from widespread admiration was never complete. Instead, her reputation became sharply divided. For some listeners, she remains a phenomenal gospel vocalist. For others, the 2016 sermon permanently changed how they viewed her. Her story demonstrates how a few publicly delivered words can transform an artist's image almost overnight. Donnie McClurkin. Donnie McClurkin became one of gospel music's biggest voices by singing about survival faith and restoration. Born in South Carolina in 1959 and raised in New York, McClurkin endured severe childhood trauma before building a ministry and recording career. His songs, Stand and We Fall Down, became gospel standards, while his albums sold millions of copies worldwide. His enormous success, however, did not protect him from controversy. McClurkin has spoken publicly about his sexuality and has described himself as having experienced same-sex attraction, while believing that his Christian faith enabled him to live differently. His characterization of homosexuality and his religious teachings on the subject generated strong criticism, particularly from LGBTQ advocates who rejected the idea that sexual orientation should be treated as something requiring change. The conflict became especially visible in 2013. McClurkin was scheduled to perform at a Washington, D.C. event commemorating the March on Washington, but he ultimately did not participate after objections were raised regarding his past statements about homosexuality. For supporters, McClurkin's testimony represents his personal interpretation of Christian faith and transformation. Critics argue that messages suggesting homosexuality can or should be changed can contribute to stigma and harm. That disagreement has followed him for years. Yet most hated requires context. McClurkin was never rejected by gospel audiences as a whole. He remained an influential pastor and recording artist, winning major awards and maintaining a substantial following. His story is therefore not about a gospel legend everyone suddenly abandoned. It is about the collision between traditional religious doctrine, personal testimony, and changing social attitudes. Donnie McClurkin built his career singing about redemption, but some of his most deeply held beliefs also made him one of gospel's most debated figures. Leandria Johnson. Leandria Johnson never built her appeal around appearing perfect. In fact, the contradictions between her faith struggles and outspoken personality became central to why audiences found her both compelling and controversial. Born in Florida in 1983, Johnson reached national prominence after winning the third season of BET's Sunday Best in 2010. Her extraordinary voice quickly translated into recording success. Her debut project, The Awakening of Leandria Johnson, reached the top of Billboard's gospel chart, and Jesus later earned her a Grammy Award. But Johnson refused to conform easily to expectations surrounding gospel celebrities. She publicly discussed becoming pregnant outside marriage after her Sunday Best victory. Rather than disappearing behind carefully controlled publicity, she continued performing and speaking openly about the realities of her life. Her candor repeatedly generated criticism from conservative Christian audiences. Johnson has been open about drinking and other personal struggles, while her blunt language and comments about organized religion have sometimes triggered backlash online. One particularly controversial period came when videos circulated of Johnson using profanity while criticizing aspects of the church and gospel industry. For listeners accustomed to gospel stars presenting highly polished spiritual images, her behavior seemed incompatible with their expectations of ministry. Yet Johnson's supporters saw something different: honesty. She later publicly addressed her struggles with alcohol and sought help, making vulnerability part of her testimony rather than pretending those difficulties never existed. Calling Leandria Johnson hated therefore oversimplifies her complicated relationship with gospel culture. She has faced genuine condemnation, but she has also inspired listeners who recognize themselves in her imperfections. Johnson's story asks an uncomfortable question. Does a gospel singer lose credibility when her struggles become visible, or can acknowledging those struggles make the message of redemption more authentic? Tonex B. Slade. Few gospel careers illustrate the tension between identity, religion, and artistic freedom more dramatically than that of Tonex, later known as B. Slade. Born Anthony Charles Williams II in San Diego in 1975, Tonex emerged as one of contemporary gospel's most adventurous artists, combining traditional church influences with funk, soul, electronic music, rock, and theatrical performance. His creativity brought both acclaim and suspicion. Projects including out-the-box expanded expectations of what gospel could sound like, and Tonex earned major award recognition. Yet his unconventional fashion genre, blending music and willingness to challenge conservative church culture, made him controversial long before his personal life became a public debate. The conflict intensified as Tonex spoke openly about sexuality and his experiences within Christianity. His evolving public identity eventually became closely associated with the name B. Slade, marking both an artistic transformation and distance from expectations attached to his earlier gospel persona. For parts of the traditional gospel community, this represented a painful rupture. For LGBTQ listeners and supporters, however, B. Slade's willingness to discuss the intersection of sexuality, faith, and rejection offered representation rarely visible in mainstream gospel. It would be inaccurate to reduce this story to gospel rejected him because he was gay. His career transformation involved religion, artistic independence, industry, relationships, identity, and personal choices. Nor did controversy erase his musical abilities. Instead, Tonex became an example of what can happen when an artist refuses to separate private identity from public expression simply to remain acceptable to a religious marketplace. His story fits this title because the backlash was real, but so was the admiration. Tonex did not disappear. He reinvented himself as B. Slade, turning rejection and controversy into a new chapter where artistic freedom mattered more than maintaining the image gospel audiences originally expected. Ty Tribbett. Ty Tribbett built his reputation on explosive energy. With greater anointing, commonly known as GA, he helped bring a youthful, rhythmically adventurous sound to contemporary gospel. Born in Camden, New Jersey in 1976, Tribbett developed into a singer, songwriter, choir director, and musician whose performances could make gospel concerts feel almost electrifying. Success brought enormous visibility and eventually intense scrutiny. Tribbett publicly acknowledged that he had been unfaithful in his marriage to Shantae Tribbett. He later explained that the crisis produced devastating consequences within their relationship, including a period of separation. Because Tribbett was not merely an entertainer but a prominent Christian figure whose music centered on faith, the revelation generated significant disappointment among some gospel listeners. The controversy became especially painful because his marriage had existed alongside his ministry. Critics saw hypocrisy, a man publicly proclaiming Christian principles while privately violating commitments central to those teachings. But the story did not end with the scandal. Ty and Shantae eventually reconciled, and Tribbett spoke openly about failure, accountability, forgiveness, and rebuilding their marriage. Instead of pretending the affair never occurred, he incorporated lessons from the experience into his public testimony. Professionally, Tribbett recovered strongly. His later work earned major recognition, including Grammy Awards, demonstrating that the controversy did not permanently remove him from gospel's upper tier. That makes the phrase "most hated" complicated. Tribbett experienced real backlash and damaged trust, but he was not permanently cast out. His story became less about cancellation than restoration. For audiences who remember the scandal, the uncomfortable question remains powerful: should a gospel leader who publicly fails be permanently judged by that failure, or does the faith he preaches require room for repentance, forgiveness, and a genuine second chance? Dietrich Haddon. Dietrich Haddon has spent much of his career challenging the idea of what a gospel performer should look and sound like. Born in Detroit in 1973, Haddon grew up in the church and developed into a singer, songwriter, producer, pastor, and eventually television personality. His willingness to blend contemporary R&B, hip-hop rhythms, and cinematic visuals with Christian messages helped him reach younger audiences, but it also attracted criticism from traditional gospel listeners. The most difficult period came when Haddon's personal life became public. His marriage to Damita Chandler, another gospel singer, ended after years together. Haddon later acknowledged that he had made serious mistakes during the marriage, including infidelity. He subsequently began a relationship with Dominique McTire, whom he married in 2013. For an artist closely identified with Christian ministry, the revelations generated significant backlash. Some listeners accused him of hypocrisy, while online debates questioned whether someone whose private behavior contradicted his preaching should continue occupying a prominent gospel platform. Haddon did not disappear. Instead, he confronted portions of the controversy publicly and continued recording. His life also became more visible through the reality series, Preachers of LA, which itself attracted criticism for presenting pastors through the conventions of reality television. Yet describing Haddon as universally hated would be inaccurate. He retained a substantial audience and continued working in gospel music and ministry. His story instead reveals the uncomfortable expectations placed on religious celebrities. Audiences often demand that the person delivering a spiritual message embody it without visible failure. Haddon's career survived because he refused to allow scandal to become his final chapter. Whether listeners view that as redemption or contradiction depends largely on what they believe gospel leadership should require. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Long before rock and roll became a cultural revolution, Sister Rosetta Tharpe was already playing electric guitar with an intensity that would influence generations. Born in Arkansas in 1915, Tharpe began performing religious music as a child alongside her mother. By adulthood, she had developed an extraordinary combination of gospel vocals, blues phrasing, and aggressive guitar playing. That combination made her revolutionary and controversial. In the late 1930s and 1940s, Tharpe began performing gospel material in secular venues including nightclubs. For conservative church audiences, sacred music belonged inside worship spaces. Hearing gospel performed alongside jazz and popular entertainment disturbed listeners who believed she was crossing a spiritual boundary. Her 1938 recording of Rock Me demonstrated the fusion that would eventually make her an important precursor to rock and roll. Later performances showed guitar techniques that anticipated artists who became household names years afterward. The criticism did not stop her. Tharpe continued moving between religious and secular audiences, collaborating with Mary Knight, and building a career that challenged rigid musical categories. Her influence can be heard in the generations that followed, including musicians associated with early rock, blues, and soul. Her personal life has also inspired modern discussion, particularly her relationship with Knight, but historians must be careful about assigning definitive labels where surviving evidence does not establish every private detail. Tharpe died in 1973 at 58. Today, the irony is striking. Some of the qualities that made traditional audiences suspicious of her became the reasons history celebrates her. In 2018, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an early influence. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was criticized for crossing boundaries. Decades later, those same boundaries look remarkably small compared with the musical world she helped create. James Cleveland. James Cleveland became so influential that he earned the title King of Gospel. Born in Chicago in 1931, Cleveland developed within the city's powerful gospel tradition and eventually became a singer, composer, arranger, choir leader, and minister. His rough, emotionally charged voice helped reshape modern gospel, while his work with large choirs influenced generations of church musicians. Cleveland's accomplishments were enormous. He founded the Gospel Music Workshop of America in 1967, creating an institution that became deeply important to gospel performers and composers. He also worked with major artists, including a young Aretha Franklin, and became one of the genre's most recognizable figures. But Cleveland's legacy later became complicated by serious allegations. After his death in 1991, a lawsuit was filed alleging that Cleveland had sexually abused a male foster child during the singer's lifetime. The allegations were deeply disturbing and have continued to appear in discussions of his legacy. However, accuracy is essential. Cleveland was never criminally convicted of those allegations, and because he had already died, he could not respond to them in court. That distinction should never be erased for dramatic storytelling. Cleveland died at age 59, leaving behind a musical catalog and institutional influence that remain significant. His legacy therefore presents a difficult question about how audiences remember celebrated cultural figures when serious allegations emerge alongside documented achievements. Calling Cleveland simply hated would flatten a much more complicated history. During his career, he was enormously respected within gospel music. The controversy surrounding his reputation became particularly significant after his death. His story belongs in this discussion not because history unanimously rejected him, but because admiration and disturbing allegations now exist side by side, forcing later generations to confront both rather than pretending only one exists. Clara Ward. Clara Ward was one of gospel music's brightest stars, decades before contemporary gospel became a major commercial industry. Born in Philadelphia in 1924, she rose to prominence with the famous Ward Singers, a group guided by her mother, Gertrude Ward. Their polished presentation, powerful harmonies, and theatrical stage presence helped transform expectations surrounding female gospel performers. But innovation brought criticism. The Ward Singers appeared in glamorous dresses, performed with sophisticated choreography, and brought gospel into venues beyond traditional churches. To some conservative religious audiences, that presentation seemed too close to secular show business. The tension intensified as Clara performed in increasingly mainstream settings, including nightclub and Las Vegas engagements. For critics, gospel was supposed to remain separated from entertainment culture. For Ward, professional presentation did not automatically erase religious meaning. Her influence nevertheless became enormous. Aretha Franklin knew Ward personally through the gospel world surrounding Reverend C.L. Franklin, and Ward's vocal approach helped shape performers who later carried gospel techniques into popular music. Ward's private life has also generated extensive speculation. Some accounts have discussed alleged romantic relationships, including claims involving women. Such material must be handled carefully because historical rumors are not automatically established facts, particularly when the people involved cannot clarify them. What is documented is that Ward endured demanding touring schedules and serious health problems. She died in 1973 at only 48 years old after suffering strokes. Clara Ward's story demonstrates that controversy in gospel did not begin with social media. Long before internet outrage, performers could be condemned simply for changing clothing, venues, presentation, or musical expectations. What some viewed as unacceptable commercialization ultimately helped expand gospel's reach, and Ward became one of the women who pushed that door open. B.B. Winans. B.B. Winans was born into one of gospel music's most celebrated families. Born Benjamin Winans in Detroit in 1962, he became widely known alongside his sister C.C. Winans. As B.B. and C.C. Winans, the siblings helped contemporary gospel cross into mainstream R&B audiences while maintaining an explicitly faith-centered identity. Success made B.B. a respected gospel figure, but his reputation faced a serious challenge in 2009. Winans was arrested following an allegation involving his ex-wife Deborah Winans, who accused him of pushing her during a domestic dispute. The case attracted significant attention because his public identity was closely connected to Christian music and ministry. In the aftermath, controversy also surrounded scheduled television appearances. The legal outcome is crucial. The misdemeanor domestic assault charge was ultimately dismissed, and Winans maintained that he had not committed the assault as alleged. Any responsible account therefore needs to distinguish clearly between an arrest, an accusation, and a conviction. Winans continued his career afterward. He remained active as a recording artist, author, performer, and member of the larger Winans musical dynasty. His accomplishments were not erased, nor did gospel audiences universally abandon him. That makes his inclusion under a title such as Gospel Legends, who were the most hated, dependent on careful wording. There was public controversy and reputational damage, but claiming that Winans became broadly hated or permanently blacklisted would exaggerate the evidence. His story instead illustrates how quickly allegations can collide with a religious celebrity's carefully established public image. For decades, B.B. Winans sang about faith, family, and redemption. When his own name entered an uncomfortable public controversy, audiences were forced to separate headlines from legal outcomes and decide how much one turbulent chapter should influence the judgment of an entire career. Erica Campbell. Erica Campbell built her career around faith, family, and a willingness to bring gospel music into contemporary culture. Born in Inglewood, California in 1972, she became famous alongside her younger sister Tina Campbell as Mary Mary. Their breakthrough single Shackles. Praise You crossed gospel boundaries in 2000, combining an explicitly Christian message with modern R&B production and introducing the duo to audiences far beyond traditional churches. But that crossover appeal sometimes generated criticism. Some conservative listeners questioned Mary Mary's fashion contemporary sound and willingness to operate within mainstream entertainment. Erica later encountered another wave of debate after launching her solo career, particularly around her 2015 song I Lou God. The track incorporated trap and hip-hop elements into gospel, prompting arguments over whether such production belonged in Christian music. Campbell also attracted public discussion over her clothing. A widely circulated photograph showing her in a fitted white dress produced criticism from people who believed gospel performers should present themselves more conservatively. Campbell defended herself rather than accepting the idea that spirituality required hiding her femininity. Yet calling Erica Campbell one of gospel's most hated figures requires perspective. She has never been broadly rejected. She has enjoyed considerable success, including Grammy recognition with Mary Mary and as a solo performer, while maintaining a substantial Christian audience. What makes her relevant to this story is the resistance she encountered whenever she challenged traditional expectations. For decades, gospel performers, especially women, have faced scrutiny not merely over what they sing, but how they dress, move, and present themselves. Erica Campbell stepped directly into that debate. Her critics saw boundaries being weakened. Her supporters saw gospel evolving. And despite the arguments, Campbell continued doing what had made Mary Mary successful from the beginning, delivering an old message through sounds that belonged unmistakably to a new generation. Yolanda Adams. Yolanda Adams became one of contemporary gospel's most recognizable voices, without fitting every traditional expectation placed on female Christian performers. Born in Houston, Texas in 1961, Adams moved from teaching school and singing in church to an internationally successful recording career. Her 1999 album Mountain High, Valley Low became a major breakthrough, while songs such as Open My Heart helped expand her audience far beyond conventional gospel circles. Success, however, brought scrutiny. Adams has spoken publicly about receiving criticism from people within gospel culture because she wore form-fitting clothing. To some conservative observers, her glamorous appearance conflicted with how they believed a Christian singer should present herself. That reaction revealed a larger tension surrounding gospel performers. Adams was delivering explicitly faith-centered music while operating on major stages and reaching mainstream audiences. For supporters, that visibility demonstrated gospel's expanding influence. For critics, crossover success and glamorous presentation sometimes appeared too close to secular entertainment. Yet the phrase "most hated" must be handled carefully in her case. Adams was never broadly rejected by gospel audiences. She became an enormously respected performer, accumulated major awards, and maintained a career spanning decades. Her experience is better described as backlash and judgment over presentation rather than widespread hostility. That distinction makes her story especially revealing. Yolanda Adams did not need a career-destroying scandal to attract criticism. At times, clothing and confidence were enough. Rather than allowing those arguments to reshape her identity, Adams continued performing on her own terms. Her longevity ultimately provides the strongest answer to her critics. The wardrobe generated debate, but the voice and music built the legacy. Marvin Sapp. Marvin Sapp built his reputation around perseverance, faith, and surviving moments that could easily overwhelm a person. Born in Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1967, he gained national recognition as a member of commissioned one of contemporary gospel's influential vocal groups before establishing a successful solo career during the 1990s. His defining breakthrough arrived with Never Would Have Made It from the 2007 album Thirsty. Inspired by the grief surrounding his father's death, the song became an extraordinary gospel success and crossed into wider audiences. Its message of surviving hardship transformed Sapp from an established gospel performer into one of the genre's most recognizable voices, as both a pastor and celebrity. However, Sapp has sometimes faced criticism over statements concerning relationships, church behavior, and social expectations. Comments from sermons or public discussions have occasionally generated online debate, demonstrating how closely religious leaders are scrutinized when their words circulate beyond their original congregations. But accuracy matters here. There is no strong basis for claiming Sapp was broadly hated or blacklisted by gospel music. His inclusion under a title such as Gospel Legends, who were the most hated works, only when hated is understood as facing periods of criticism rather than universal rejection. Sapp also endured devastating personal loss when his wife, Melinda Sapp, died from complications of colon cancer in 2010. He continued raising their children while maintaining his ministry and recording career. That resilience ultimately overshadows the controversies. Marvin Sapp became famous for singing that he never would have made it without faith. His own life gave those words extraordinary weight, turning personal grief into a message millions could understand. Rance Allen. Rance Allen helped reshape gospel music by introducing sounds that some traditional listeners initially believed belonged outside the church. Born in Monroe, Michigan in 1948, Allen formed the Rance Allen Group with his brothers Steve and Thomas. During the 1970s, their association with Stax Records' Gospel Truth imprint introduced a distinctive mixture of gospel, soul, funk, rock, and R&B. At the center stood Allen's extraordinary voice. He could move from deep, preacher-like passages into astonishing high notes, while his band used rhythms and instrumentation associated with contemporary black popular music. Younger audiences responded enthusiastically, but some traditional church listeners were uncomfortable with gospel sounding so close to secular soul and funk. That resistance is the strongest reason Allen belongs in this discussion. His controversy was not based on a sensational, personal scandal. Instead, it reflected an older debate about where sacred music ended and secular entertainment began. What sounded inappropriate to some listeners during one era eventually became far less unusual as contemporary gospel evolved. Importantly, Allen was not broadly hated or disgraced. Over time, he became deeply respected, continued ministering, and served as a bishop in the Church of God in Christ. His influence extended across gospel and into artists working in soul and R&B. Allen died in 2020 at 71 years old, leaving behind more than 5 decades of music. His story reveals an irony found throughout gospel history. Yesterday's controversy can become tomorrow's tradition. Rance Allen was criticized because his music seemed too modern, but generations later, many of the boundaries he challenged no longer seem radical at all. Behind every gospel legend is a story more complicated than the music we remember. Some challenged tradition. Some endured scandals, and others faced fierce criticism simply for refusing to fit the image people expected from a gospel star. Yet controversy raises a difficult question: should one mistake personal struggle or unpopular choice outweigh decades of talent, faith, and influence? Perhaps some criticism was justified, but in other cases, yesterday's rebellion became tomorrow's accepted tradition. So where do you draw the line between accountability and forgiveness? Which gospel legend on this list was judged too harshly, and which criticism do you believe was deserved? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Golden Black Legends for more unforgettable stories.